I'm freezing.
I'm
Can I get in your
freezing.
car? Annie's
Can I
voice was
get in
nearly
your
swallowed
car?
by the howling wind as she leaned toward the driver's side window. The man inside turned to look at her. He was alone in the black sedan, the engine still running, a cigarette held between two fingers. No, he said. Annie froze. Snow clung to her hair and dusted the shoulders of her coat. Sir? I said no. He looked past her, toward the deserted industrial road ahead. I don't let strangers into my car. Not out here, and especially not at night. Annie's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold on to the damp paper grocery bag pressed against her chest. She rubbed her palms together, then pulled her fingers inside her sleeves, trying to preserve what little warmth she had left. Please, she said. I only need to sit inside for a moment, just for a little while. As soon as I warm up, I'll get out. I'm so cold. The man took a drag from his cigarette, then slowly exhaled the smoke. His gaze moved from her face to the dark road behind her. I understand that you're cold, he said, but I'm cold too. I had to lower this window just to talk to you. His thumb touched the control on the door. The window began to rise. Annie quickly leaned forward. Panic made the words spill from her mouth faster. Please, sir. I'm not asking for money. I'm carrying medicine and food for my mother. But the buses stopped running. I only need to warm up for a minute so I can walk home. The window continued sliding upward until only a narrow opening remained. For a moment, Annie thought he was going to close it completely. She lifted one stiff hand and tapped softly on the glass. It was not a forceful knock. It was only the faint, frightened tapping of someone who had run out of ways to ask for help. Sir, please, she said through the small opening. Just let me sit inside for a little while. I won't touch anything. I can sit quietly and not say a word. I promise I'll leave as soon as I stop shaking. Her breath turned into a white cloud, slipping through the gap and brushing lightly against his cheek. The man flinched and immediately pressed the button again, lowering the window a few more inches. Hey, he snapped. What do you think you're doing? Annie jerked backward. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. You breathe in my face, tap on my car window, and then still expect me to let you in? His voice rose with every word. You're begging me for help, and you still have the nerve to disrespect me like that? I didn't mean any disrespect. Her teeth were chattering so hard she had to stop halfway through the sentence. I'm sorry, sir. I can't stop shaking. I only wanted you to hear me. You're standing too close to my car. I know. I'm sorry. Then step back. Annie stepped back at once. Her boots slid slightly on the snow-covered sidewalk. She wrapped her arms tightly around herself, but the cold had already cut through her coat, seeped through her sweater, and soaked into the damp socks inside her boots. The paper bag pressed against her chest trembled with every shiver that passed through her body. The man kept one hand on the window control, ready to close it at any moment and shut her out again. Annie turned and looked down the road. All she could see were dark warehouses on either side, their loading docks sealed and their gates locked. Snow blanketed the sidewalks. A single street lamp cast a weak yellow glow across the pavement, but beyond that there was nothing except the biting wind and a blinding curtain of white. There aren't any homes around here, she said. The man frowned. What? There are no houses, no stores still open. Not even a bus shelter, where I can get out of the wind. Annie turned back to him, her voice beginning to break. My phone is almost dead. I don't have anywhere else to go. That doesn't mean I have to let you into my car. I know you don't know me. Annie tightened her grip on the paper bag. But I'm freezing. Please. Just 1 minute. A violent shiver tore through her, jerking her shoulders forward. She began stomping her feet in place, her small, clumsy movements kicking up snow around her boots. Between each step, she rubbed her hands together and gasped for breath, as though forcing herself to keep moving was the only thing keeping her from collapsing. Please, she said again. I'm so cold. I can't feel my fingers anymore. The man's expression tightened. For a moment, his irritation seemed to hold him in place. Then he lowered the window a little farther and pushed one bare hand outside, as though he needed to test for himself whether the weather was truly as bad as she claimed. The wind struck his hand immediately. He drew in a sharp breath and pulled it back inside almost at once. Damn it. He held his hand in front of the heater vent and rubbed his fingers together. Tiny flakes of snow melted across his reddened knuckles. Annie watched him closely. That's what I've been feeling this entire time. He did not answer. Please, she continued. That is all I'm asking for. Just long enough to feel warm again. His hand remained in front of the warm air. This time, he studied her more carefully. The snow covering her hair, the paper bag she refused to set down, and the way her legs trembled each time her boots came down after those desperate little steps. If I let you in, he said. Where exactly do you plan to sit? Anywhere. The passenger seat. The back seat. I don't care. The back seat? He narrowed his eyes. So you sit behind me, and then what? I'm supposed to drive while watching my back? I let my guard down for 1 second, and you do something from behind my seat? Annie stopped stomping her feet. A flash of hurt crossed her face, but it was almost immediately overtaken by fear. She understood that even showing anger or offense might be enough to make him believe she was dangerous. I'm not going to do anything to you. How am I supposed to know that? You can't. She swallowed hard, struggling to keep her voice steady. You don't know me. I understand that. Then you should understand why my answer is no. Annie looked down at the paper bag in her hands. The bottom was soaked through and beginning to sag beneath the weight of the food container and the bottle of medicine inside. She tried to hold it more securely with fingers that had nearly stopped obeying her. I don't know you either, she said quietly. But I still came to your window because I thought freezing outside in this weather was more dangerous than asking a stranger for help. The man pressed his lips into a thin line. Annie drew in a deep breath, but it still came out trembling. My mother works at a factory nearby. She's sick. She has a fever and a terrible cough, but they still made her stay for overtime. I'm trying to bring her antibiotics and soup. Why are you walking? The buses stopped running because of the snow. Then call someone. There isn't anyone else. A taxi? A rideshare? My phone is almost dead. And I don't have enough money. He glanced down at the bag in her hands. Your mother let you come out dressed like that? No. When she realized I was going to walk, she told me to go back home. I was trying to get there when I saw your car. Which factory does she work at? North Lake Foods. Something flickered across his face. It was subtle, but unmistakable. Annie could not tell what it meant. Recognition, perhaps. Or discomfort. He looked through the windshield toward the dark road, then back at her. Let me call someone to help you. There isn't anyone to call, Annie said. My mother is still at work, and I'm only trying to get home. I don't need money. I don't need anything from you except a few minutes out of this wind. Why didn't you stay at the bus stop? Because they canceled service, and everyone left. There has to be a gas station somewhere nearby. There isn't. Her voice caught before she could steady it. Please, stop telling me to go to places that aren't here. For the first time, the man looked away. The cigarette between the man's fingers had burned nearly all the way down to the filter. He crushed it into the ashtray without taking another drag. Annie could not tell whether he was beginning to reconsider or simply preparing to leave her out there without having to watch what happened next. Her legs began trembling violently again. She tried to keep moving, rocking from heel to toe, even though the snow beneath her boots no longer seemed to feel solid at all. I'm sorry I tapped on your window, she said. And I'm sorry I stood too close to your car. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. The man turned back to look at her. The anger had not completely left his face, but it seemed to have softened slightly. What's your name? Annie Brooks. He glanced at the road behind her. Where do you live? South Ada Street. That's miles from here. I know. You walked all the way from there? I was going to see my mother first. Then she told me to go home. He stared at her face as though he were still trying to find the part of her story that did not add up. Annie wanted to tell him she did not have enough strength left to make anything up. Instead, she said, Please, I won't sit behind you. I'll sit where you can see me. I'll keep my hands in my lap. You can keep the doors locked until I get out. His eyebrows drew together. You've thought of an awful lot of rules for someone who only needs help. I'm trying to make it easier for you to say yes. That answer silenced him. The wind suddenly grew stronger, sweeping a thin sheet of snow across the hood of the car. Annie tried to lift one foot, but her knee responded sluggishly, as though it no longer belonged to her. She reached for the edge of the open window, but she could not reach it. Her body lurched forward, and she stumbled against the front fender. The paper bag in her arms struck the side of the car. The bottom seam, already soaked through, split open at once. The plastic container of soup fell first. It struck the snow, rolled into the beam of the headlights, and burst open. Pale broth spilled across the pavement, disappearing almost as soon as it touched the ground. Several packets of crackers followed, their wrappers darkening in the wet snow. Annie cried out and quickly bent down to grab the orange prescription bottle before it could roll beneath the car. Her stiff fingers managed to close around it, but when she tried to stand, one of her boots slid out from under her. She fell hard onto one knee. For several seconds, Annie simply knelt there, clutching the bottle of medicine against her chest as though it were the only thing she had left to protect. The driver's side door swung open. The warm air inside the car was instantly torn away by the freezing wind. The man drew in a sharp breath as the storm struck his face. He stepped out, pulled his coat tightly around himself, and hurried around the front of the car. "Don't try to stand up like that," he said. Annie looked up at him. "I need the medicine." He reached a hand toward her, then stopped abruptly, as though it had just occurred to him that she might be afraid of him too. "May I help you up?" The question surprised her even more than the fact that he had gotten out of the car. Annie nodded once. He took hold of her forearm instead of her hand and carefully pulled her to her feet. The moment her weight settled back onto her legs, she swayed. His grip tightened at once to keep her from falling again. "Passenger seat," he said. "Up front. Somewhere I can see you." "Thank you. Get inside first." He opened the passenger door for her. Annie lowered herself painfully onto the leather seat. Though she tried to brush away the snow, she still left wet streaks along the edge of the cushion. The hot air from the vents hit her frozen skin, stinging so sharply it felt like needles. She held the medicine bottle in both hands, close against her stomach, as though she were afraid someone might take it away. The man closed her door, hurried around the front of the car, and slid into the driver's seat with snow covering his shoulders. He slammed the door shut and blew warm air onto his bare hands. "Dear God," he muttered, turning the heat higher. "You've been walking around out there in weather like this?" Annie held her numb fingers near the vent. "I didn't think it would get this bad. You should have checked the forecast before going out in a storm like this. My mother needed her medicine." He looked at the bottle in her hands, then through the window at the spilled soup outside. It had already been almost completely covered by a fresh layer of snow. His expression tightened. "Put on your seatbelt." Annie did as he said. Even pulling the belt across her body took more strength than it should have. He reached for the navigation screen on the dashboard. "Give me your address." Annie recited it slowly, trying to pronounce each number clearly, even though her teeth were still chattering. He entered the address, then frowned when the route appeared on the screen. It would take almost 40 minutes even in good weather. "I'm sorry." He turned toward her. "Why do you keep apologizing?" Annie had no answer that would make him understand. He put the car into gear and looked back toward the road. "I suppose there's no chance of a quiet evening now." The words still sounded reluctant, but when he eased the car onto the road, he drove so carefully that the sedan was barely crawling. The windshield wipers struggled to clear away the snow that kept gathering on the glass. Beyond the reach of the headlights, the city had nearly disappeared, leaving only snowflakes sweeping through the darkness and the faint red glow of a few taillights in the distance. They passed several blocks before he spoke again. "My name is William Harrison." Annie gave a small nod. "Thank you, Mr. Harrison, for letting me into your car." William kept his eyes on the road. "Your mother works at North Lake Foods?" "Yes." "On the packaging line?" Annie turned to look at him. "How did you know that?" William paused for a moment. "Factories like that usually need extra packaging workers around Christmas. My mother has worked there for 11 years. Annie gently rubbed two fingers together, wincing as sharp pain began returning with the warmth. "She almost never misses a shift. She's been sick all week, and they still called her in." "They forced her to go?" Annie lowered her eyes to the medicine bottle. "My mother says no one there ever really forces you to do anything. But if you refuse, they can always cut your hours." Her voice grew quieter. "Before she left tonight, she was coughing so badly she had to sit down on the edge of the bed, but she still went in because she was afraid they would cut her shifts in January." William's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. His phone lit up on the center console. Annie caught only part of the message before the screen went dark again. "Grant Mercer. North Lake is ready to sign the papers." William immediately reached over and turned the phone face down. Annie noticed, but she was too exhausted to ask why the name of her mother's factory had appeared on a stranger's phone. By the time they finally reached Annie's apartment building, the front steps were completely covered in snow. William pulled over at the curb and watched as Annie struggled with her seatbelt. "I can get upstairs by myself," she said quickly. "I never said you couldn't. I don't want to take up any more of your time." He looked at her soaked clothes, then at her hands, still stiff from the cold. "You are not walking from my car into a dark building when you can barely stand." Before Annie could protest, the phone in her coat pocket began to vibrate. She fumbled to pull it out. The caller's name appeared on the screen. "Marlene, Mom's work." Annie answered immediately. "Miss Marlene, is something wrong with my mother?" On the other end of the line, the woman was crying. She tried to hold back her sobs, but her voice still broke apart. "Annie, listen to me. Your mother just collapsed on the line. They're taking her to Mercy Harbor Hospital right now." The medicine bottle slipped from Annie's hands and fell to the floor of the car. If Annie's story touched your heart, please like this video and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories of kindness, courage, and justice. Annie did not hear the rest of Marlene's sentence at first. Her mother had collapsed. Those two words filled the car until there seemed to be no room left for breath. "What happened?" Annie asked. "Was she awake? Did she hit her head?" "She got dizzy near the packing table and went down on one knee before we could catch her," Marlene said. Machinery hummed behind her, and someone nearby was telling workers to move away from the line. "She's awake now, honey. She's talking. The paramedics think it may be fever and exhaustion, but they want her checked at the hospital." Annie pressed her hand against her mouth. "Did she take her medicine?" Marlene asked. "No, I have it. I was trying to bring it to her. Then bring it to Mercy Harbor. I'm going to follow as soon as they let me clock out." A man's voice cut through in the background. "Marlene, hang up and get back to your station." Marlene lowered her voice. "Do not come to the plant, Annie. Go straight to the hospital. Your mama is all right enough to complain that the ambulance is too expensive, so take that as a good sign." The call ended. Annie reached for the medicine bottle on the floor, but her fingers would not close around it. William picked it up and set it carefully in her lap. "Mercy Harbor?" he asked. She nodded, staring at the bottle. "I should have gotten there sooner." "No, she forgot her medicine. I knew she was sick." "Annie." His voice was sharper than comfort usually sounded, but it made her look at him. "You were walking through a storm with food and medication in your hands. This did not happen because you failed her." Her eyes filled anyway. She shouldn't have been there. William turned the car away from her apartment building. "Then we go find out why she was." The streets toward the hospital were worse than the roads they had already crossed. Snowplows moved in the opposite direction with yellow lights flashing, pushing heavy banks of snow toward the curb. William kept both hands on the wheel and drove slowly, saying nothing each time the tires shifted beneath them. Annie called the emergency department twice before someone confirmed that Denise Brooks had arrived and was being evaluated. They would not tell her more by phone. "She hates hospitals," Annie said, mostly to herself. "She always says if you go in feeling bad, you come out with a bill that makes you feel worse." William glanced at her but did not smile. "Does she have insurance through work?" "She has something. She says it takes a piece of every paycheck and still argues with her whenever she needs it." His phone lit again on the console. He ignored it. Annie noticed the name before the screen darkened. "North Lake," she said. William's eyes stayed on the road. "Your message said North Lake." "It did. Why?" He took a moment before answering. "My company has business under discussion with them." Annie turned her body toward him despite the seatbelt. "You work with the factory?" "Not yet. There is an agreement being prepared." For several seconds she said nothing. The heater blew warm air against her wet jeans, but the cold in her chest had changed shape. "My mother works until she can barely stand," Annie said. "And you make agreements with people like that?" "I did not know about your mother." "You knew there was a factory." William absorbed the blow without looking at her. "Yes." Annie faced the windshield again. She wished she had enough strength to be angry in a way that did not come out sounding afraid. "Please just get me to her." "I will." Mercy Harbor Medical Center stood 6 stories high behind a curtain of snow, its emergency entrance bright under a covered drive. William pulled up close to the sliding doors. Before the car had fully stopped, Annie reached for the handle. "Wait," he said. "I need to go." "I know. Let me help you across the ice." "I can walk." She opened the door, stepped onto the pavement and nearly lost her footing before catching the roof of the car. William came around without another argument. He did not touch her until she gave a small nod, then offered his arm rather than taking hers. Inside the emergency department, the air smelled of disinfectant and wet winter coats. A television mounted in the waiting room showed canceled flights and cars stalled on the expressway. An older man sat with a towel pressed to his forehead. A mother tried to settle a crying toddler beneath a puffy coat. Annie approached the desk, still holding the medicine bottle. My mother was brought in from Northlake Foods. Denise Brooks. The nurse typed quickly. Are you family? I'm her daughter. She is in an exam room. She is stable. The doctor is with her now. Stable. Annie repeated the word in her head, holding on to it because it was the first thing all night that did not feel as though it were falling apart. Can I see her? As soon as the doctor is finished. We need you to fill out a few details first. The nurse handed her a clipboard. Annie stared at the boxes. Emergency contact. Insurance provider. Prescription medications. Allergies. She knew some answers, but not all of them. Denise had always carried the difficult parts quietly. As if keeping her daughter away from paperwork could keep trouble away too. William stepped back from the counter, giving her space. Annie felt him there anyway. She filled in her name and address, then stopped at the insurance section. I don't know the member number, she said. That is fine, the nurse told her. We can retrieve it once your mother is settled. A door opened behind the desk, and a physician in blue scrubs came out holding a tablet. Family for Denise Brooks? Annie moved so quickly the clipboard nearly fell. I'm her daughter. Is she okay? She is awake and asking for you, the doctor said. Her oxygen level is good. She appears to have a respiratory infection, and working while feverish likely left her dehydrated and lightheaded. We are giving her fluids, checking a chest x-ray, and keeping her for observation tonight. At this point, I do not see anything that suggests a medical crisis. Annie released a breath that hurt on the way out. Can she go home tomorrow? That depends on her temperature and the x-ray, but that is possible. She needs rest, fluids, and no factory shift until she is recovered. Annie looked down at the medicine in her hand. She'll say she has to work. Then somebody needs to tell her that collapsing at work is not a sign she can keep working. The doctor spoke kindly, but the sentence landed with a weight Annie already understood. A nurse guided Annie through the doors. Before following, she turned back. William remained by the waiting room chairs, snow melting from his coat onto the floor. You don't have to stay, she said. He slipped his hands into his coat pockets. I know. Annie waited. William looked at the medicine bottle in her hand, then toward the treatment rooms where her mother was waiting. I'll stay until you know how you are getting home, he said. She did not thank him. She was not ready to decide what his kindness meant. But when the nurse opened the curtain and Annie saw Denise sitting upright with an IV in her arm, looking embarrassed rather than broken, she held the medicine close and finally let herself cry. Denise lifted her free hand the moment Annie reached the bed. Come here, baby. Annie crossed the few steps between them and bent carefully into her mother's arms. She had meant to stay steady, to say the doctor's words back in a calm voice, to act as though a night in observation was only an inconvenience. Instead, her face pressed against Denise's shoulder, and the fear she had been carrying since the snow began came loose all at once. I tried to bring your medicine, she said through her tears. The bus stopped, and I tried to walk. And then you called, and I couldn't get home. Denise held her as firmly as the IV line allowed. You walked out in that storm? I thought you needed me. I did need you. Denise pulled back enough to see her face. Her eyes went to Annie's damp hair, her red hands, the wet cuffs of her jeans, but not frozen half to death. Lord, Annie, I'm okay now. No, you are not. Denise reached for the blanket at her waist and tried to tug it upward, as if there might be enough of it to cover them both. Where is your coat? Why are you soaked? Annie looked toward the curtain. A man brought me here. Denise's expression changed immediately. What man? He found me walking back. Well, I found his car. I asked to sit inside because I was so cold. You got into a stranger's car? I didn't have much choice, Mama. Denise closed her eyes for a second. Not in anger, Annie understood, but because every possible ending to that sentence had just gone through her mind. He brought you straight here? Yes. Did he ask you for anything? No. Did he touch you? Only helped me over the ice when I nearly slipped outside. He asked first. Denise studied her daughter's face. looking for what Annie might be leaving out to spare her. Annie let her look. What's his name? William Harrison. Denise frowned. Harrison? I think he owns companies. He said he has business with North Lake. At that, Denise shifted against the pillow and winced as the IV pulled at her arm. Business with that place? He said an agreement is being prepared. Denise looked toward the monitor beside her bed. Her breathing stayed even, but something in her face tightened. Of course it is. What does that mean? It means men who never stand on that floor still get paid from what happens on it. Before Annie could ask more, the curtain opened and the doctor stepped in with a nurse behind him. The doctor held the results of Denise's chest X-ray in one hand. Mrs. Brooks, there is some good news. Your lungs show infection, but no severe pneumonia. Your oxygen remains stable. We will keep you overnight, continue fluids and medication, then reevaluate you in the morning. Denise nodded. Can I work tomorrow night? Annie turned toward her. Mama. The doctor did not look surprised. No. You cannot work tomorrow night. You have a fever, an infection, and enough exhaustion to make you collapse. You need several days away from physical work, perhaps longer depending on how you respond to treatment. Denise's fingers closed around the edge of the blanket. I don't have paid time for several days. I understand that is a concern, the doctor said. But medically, I cannot clear you to return to a refrigerated packing floor while you are recovering. The nurse adjusted the tubing and gave Annie a quiet, sympathetic glance before leaving with the doctor. Denise waited until the curtain closed. Do you still have my phone? It's probably in your locker. I need to call my supervisor. No, you need to rest. I need to tell them I did not walk off the line. You collapsed, Mama. They know you did not walk off anything. Denise turned her head against the pillow, staring at the folded curtain. You don't understand how fast they replace people. I understand enough. No, baby. Denise's voice softened. You understand what ought to happen. I know what happens when a woman like me misses a shift during their busiest week. Annie had no answer. She lowered herself into the chair beside the bed, still clutching the orange prescription bottle. The label had begun peeling at one corner, where snow had melted over it. A nurse appeared a few minutes later, with a plastic bag containing Denise's purse, badge, and folded work jacket. One of your coworkers brought these with the paramedics, she said. She asked me to tell you she will call tomorrow. Marlene, Denise said quietly. She seemed worried about you. She should be worried about herself. Richard will know she called the ambulance. The nurse hesitated, then said, getting help for a sick coworker was the right thing to do. Denise gave a small, tired smile. Right and safe are not always the same thing, honey. After the nurse left, Annie took her mother's badge from the bag. Under the fluorescent hospital lighting, the photograph looked older than Denise did lying in bed. The badge had been clipped to the same uniform through years of cold shifts, holiday overtime, and mornings, when Annie had woken to find her mother already gone. There was a light tap against the metal frame outside the curtain. William stood there with his coat unbuttoned, as though he had not meant to intrude. Beside him was a girl with straight brown hair tucked behind her ears and snow melting on the shoulders of her coat. She held a canvas tote bag in both hands. Miss Brooks, William said, staying at the opening rather than stepping inside. I'm William Harrison. I brought Annie here. Denise looked him over carefully. My daughter says you helped her. I almost did not. His voice was quiet. She deserves honesty about that. Annie looked up. She had not expected him to admit it in front of her mother. Denise watched him a moment longer. But you did. Yes. The girl beside him shifted the tote to one hand. William glanced at her. This is my daughter, Lily. She brought some dry clothes for Annie. Lily stepped forward only after Denise nodded. I wasn't sure what would fit, she said to Annie. I brought sweatpants, socks, a sweatshirt, and a t-shirt. They're clean. That was kind, Denise said. Lily lowered her eyes. My dad said she was soaked. Annie accepted the bag. Thank you. Lily gave a small nod, then noticed Annie rubbing at her wrists to warm them. She hesitated before unwinding the cream-colored knitted scarf from her own neck. This is warmer than it looks, she said, laying it on the arm of Annie's chair. You can use it tonight. Annie touched the scarf with her fingertips. The wool was soft and carried the faint scent of laundry soap. I can give it back before you leave. You don't have to give it back tonight. The simple way Lily said it made Annie stop trying to refuse. She placed the scarf around her neck, careful not to let her wet hair soak it. William cleared his throat. Mrs. Brooks, the storm is not easing. Annie cannot safely return to your apartment alone tonight. I have a guest house behind my home in Winnetka. It is separate, heated, and empty. She could stay there while you are here. Denise's expression closed. We do not need to become anyone's holiday charity. I understand why you would say that. Do you? William accepted the question without flinching. Not well enough yet. Annie looked from him to her mother. Mama, it's only for tonight. Denise shook her head. A warm room is never just a warm room when it belongs to someone with more power than you. A woman's voice came from behind William. Then perhaps she should be the one setting the terms. A black woman in her late 50s stepped into view, silver threading through her short hair, a leather folder tucked beneath one arm. Lily brightened slightly when she saw her. Mrs. Coleman, she said. Hello, sweetheart. The woman looked toward Denise and Annie. I'm Ruth Coleman. I run community programs for the foundation William's wife started. Lily called me because she remembered my number. Denise's gaze sharpened. Are you here to persuade us? No, ma'am. Ruth moved into the room only after Denise gestured toward the empty chair. I'm here to make sure nobody persuades you into agreeing to something you do not understand. William said nothing. Ruth sat beside Annie and noticed the prescription bottle in her lap. First, keep that. Keep your mother's hospital discharge papers when they give them to you. Keep any text messages about her being called into work sick. Keep her time cards if she has them. Denise stared at her. Why? Because your daughter should not have to prove tonight happened from memory alone. The room grew quiet except for the soft pulse of the monitor. William looked at Denise. 3 nights, he said, for Annie. And for you when the hospital discharges you, if you choose. No publicity. No photographs. No obligation. You may leave whenever you want. Denise's eyes moved to Annie, to the wet hair curling against the cream scarf, to the tremor that had not fully left her hands. 3 nights, Denise said finally. And my daughter signs nothing without me reading it first. William nodded. Agreed. Annie reached for her mother's hand beneath the blanket. For the first time since the phone call, she felt the shaking in her fingers begin to ease. Ruth insisted Annie change into dry clothes before leaving the hospital. She stood outside the restroom holding the canvas tote while Annie pulled on Lily's sweatpants, clean socks, and a sweatshirt that hung loose at the wrists. The cream scarf stayed around her neck. Her wet boots were still cold when she put them back on, but at least the water no longer seeped through to bare skin. When she returned to Denise's room, her mother was resting with her eyes closed. The IV bag hung half-empty above the bed. Annie approached quietly, but Denise opened her eyes before she reached the chair. You go with them, Denise said. I can stay here. You cannot sleep in that chair after the night you just had. I don't want to leave you. Denise reached for her hand. The nurses have me. You come back in the morning with my phone charger and some sense. Annie gave a weak laugh despite herself. I have one of those. Bring proof. William waited near the curtain with Lily and Ruth, giving them the dignity of not standing over the goodbye. When Annie finally turned, she held her mother's work bag in one hand and the pharmacy bottle in the other. Mr. Harrison, Denise called. William stepped closer. Yes, ma'am? If my girl tells you she wants to come back here, you bring her back. I will, and if she says she is uncomfortable in that house of yours, she leaves. No questions. Annie expected him to bristle. Instead, he nodded. She will have a key. The guest house has its own entrance. I will not enter unless she asks me to. Denise watched his face, testing whether the answer was practiced or real. All right. Outside the emergency entrance, the snowfall had weakened, but the parking lot was still layered in slush and salt. William opened the rear door for Lily, then the passenger door for Annie. She stopped beside it. I can sit in the back with Lily. William understood at once. The front seat carried too much of what had happened on the road. Of course. Lily slid over without comment. During the drive north, she did not press Annie with questions. She pointed out a thermos of hot chocolate her housekeeper had packed and said, It's not very hot anymore, but it's still good. Annie took 2 careful sips, then held it in both hands because the warmth was enough. Winnetka did not look like any neighborhood Annie knew. Snow sat smooth across wide lawns and stone walls. The homes were set back from the road, their windows lit with wreaths and candles. their driveways already cleared, though the storm had barely stopped. William turned through iron gates and followed a lane past a large brick house to a smaller building behind it. "That's the guest house," he said. "You won't have to come through the main house." The building was larger than Annie's entire apartment. Not grand, exactly, but quiet and clean, with a small kitchen, a sofa, one bedroom, and a bathroom, whose towels were folded as if nobody had ever needed them in a hurry. William placed a key on the kitchen counter. "This is yours while you are here. There is a deadbolt on the front door. The thermostat is by the hallway." Annie looked from the key to him. "Does anyone else have one? My house manager has an emergency key. I can have her seal it in an envelope until you leave." Lily looked at her father, a little surprised by the offer. Annie said, "That would be better. I'll arrange it tonight." Ruth set her folder on the counter. "I wrote my number here, along with the hospital switchboard and the nurse's station. Tomorrow we can talk about your mother's work records, but not tonight. Tonight, you sleep." William glanced at the work bag Annie still held. "Is there anything you need from your apartment?" "My mother's phone charger, her glasses, maybe a clean nightgown if they keep her another night. I can drive you there in the morning. I can take the train or bus." "Not until the roads are clear." The answer came too quickly, sounding less like concern than an order. Annie's shoulders stiffened. Ruth caught it before William did. "Mr. Harrison means the roads are not safe tonight," she said. "Tomorrow Annie can decide how she travels." William looked at Annie. "Yes. That is what I mean." It was not quite an apology, but it was an adjustment, Annie noticed. Lily walked to the front door with her. "I'm in the main house if you need anything. You can text me. Or not. I know sometimes people do not want company. Thank you for the clothes." "You're welcome." Annie touched the scarf. "And this." Lily's eyes rested on the cream wool for a moment. "My mother knitted it. Well, she started it. My aunt fixed the parts that came out crooked." Annie began to unwind it. "I shouldn't have taken something that belonged to her." Lily shook her head. She would have hated knowing someone was cold while her scarf sat in a closet. Annie stopped and let the scarf stay where it was. After everyone left, the guest house became so quiet that she could hear the heating system come on beneath the floor. She locked the deadbolt, then checked it twice. She placed Denise's work bag and the medicine beside the sofa, close enough to reach without standing. The bedroom had a wide bed with clean sheets. Annie turned on the light, looked inside, and turned it off again. She took a blanket from the foot of the bed and carried it to the sofa. Sleeping near the door made more sense. She was only there for 3 nights. She did not need to settle in. Before lying down, she arranged her wet boots in front of the heating vent. The soles had split farther during the walk, and one lace was stiff with melted snow. Seeing them there, in a room warmer than anywhere she had slept in months, brought back the moment outside the car when William had told her no. She could still hear the window moving upward. Her phone rang at 7 the next morning. Annie sat up too quickly, her heart racing, then saw the hospital number. "Miss Brooks," a nurse said, "your mother is doing better. The doctor believes she can be discharged later today if her fever remains down. She asked me to tell you not to forget her glasses." Annie closed her eyes and pressed the phone to her forehead. "I won't," she said. "Tell her I'm coming." A knock sounded at the door a few minutes later. Annie rose, wrapped the blanket around her shoulders, and looked through the narrow front window before unlocking it. William stood outside holding a paper bag from a diner and a cardboard tray with 2 coffees. "I thought you might need breakfast before the hospital," he said. Annie opened the door only partway. "My mother may be discharged today. That is good news. She'll want to go home." William glanced past her at the boots drying beside the vent, then back at Annie. "Then we should make sure going home is her choice," he said. "Not the only thing she thinks she is allowed to choose." Annie studied him from behind the half-open door. "My mother does not like people making choices for her." William gave a small nod. "I am beginning to understand that." She opened the door wider. He stepped in only after she moved aside, carrying the diner bag to the kitchen counter. The smell of scrambled eggs, toast, and coffee filled the guest house. Annie had not realized how hungry she was until her stomach tightened. William set down 1 cup. "Cream and sugar are in the bag. I did not know how you take it. I don't usually drink coffee. Then there is orange juice in the car. Lily made me buy it after she said coffee was not breakfast." The mention of Lily softened the room slightly. Annie reached into the paper bag and found 2 containers: plastic silverware, napkins, and a folded receipt. William had not ordered anything elaborate, only eggs, toast, home fries, and a side of fruit. "You didn't have to bring this," she said. "No," he replied. "I did not." The answer was simple enough that she did not feel pushed into thanking him again. She sat at the small kitchen table and opened one container while William remained by the counter. "Aren't you eating?" "I already did." She doubted that. He looked like a man who had spent the night awake. His white shirt still crisp, but his eyes shadowed. A faint smell of cigarette smoke clung to his coat. Her phone buzzed with a message from the hospital. Denise's discharge review was scheduled for early afternoon. "I need to get her glasses and clothes," Annie said. "Then I need to talk to the doctor about what happens if she can't work. I can take you to your apartment, then to the hospital." Annie looked down at her toast. "I said she'll want to go home, and I said she should be allowed to choose." "That sounds right when you say it." She lifted her eyes to him. "But if the choice is home without enough heat, or staying somewhere owned by a man she met yesterday, that is not much of a choice either." William did not answer immediately. "What would make it less difficult?" "I don't know yet." "Then you do not have to answer this morning." A knock interrupted them. Ruth entered after Annie unlocked the door, carrying her leather folder and a wool cap dusted with snow. "I hope I'm not late for the diner food," she said. "There is plenty," Annie replied. "Good." William forgets that people think more clearly after eating. William glanced at Ruth. "Good morning to you too." Ruth removed her coat and sat opposite Annie. "How is your mother?" "They may discharge her today." "That is a relief." It also means she should not walk back into a workplace conversation unprepared. Ruth opened the folder. "Does she have any messages from her supervisor?" "Maybe on her phone. She left it at work." "We should retrieve it, along with her time card records if she has access to them." "Not to start a fight today. To make sure nobody rewrites what happened while she is recovering." Annie nodded. "She'll understand that." William shifted near the counter. "If North Lake created an unsafe condition, I can have my counsel contact them immediately." Ruth looked up at him. "No." His expression changed. "No? Not before Denise asks you to. Not before she knows what she wants. A call from your lawyers might frighten the company into preserving records. It might also frighten them into portraying her as a problem tied to a powerful outsider. I could protect her. You could overwhelm her situation," Ruth said. "Those are not always different things." Annie watched William absorb that. His fingers touched the edge of the counter, then released it. "All right," he said. "I will wait." They drove to South Ada Street after Annie ate half her breakfast. Ruth sat beside William in the front, leaving Annie in the back with a clean tote bag for her mother's clothes. The snow had stopped, but the street still moved slowly. Neighbors with shovels worked along sidewalks, and a man in a bear's knit cap cleared the steps of Annie's building before starting on the elderly woman's doorway next to it. Inside the apartment, Ruth waited by the kitchen while Annie collected Denise's glasses, nightgown, slippers, and a cardigan. William stayed near the door, uncomfortable in a space where every object seemed to explain something he had not had to understand before. The grocery coupons on the counter, the space heater with a frayed cord, the nursing school brochure held flat beneath a sugar bowl. On the refrigerator, Annie found a folded paper tucked under a magnet. It was a schedule from North Lake with Denise's name highlighted beside 4 overnight shifts, including Christmas Eve. "She was supposed to work tomorrow too," Annie said. Ruth came closer. "Take a photo of that." William stared at the hours printed on the page. "After she collapsed?" "This schedule was posted before she collapsed," Annie said. "Whether they expect her back now depends on how much they think they can get away with." She folded the paper and placed it in the tote. At the hospital, Denise was sitting upright in bed, wearing her own sweater over a hospital gown, and arguing gently with a nurse about leaving in borrowed slippers. Her color had improved, and the tightness in Annie's chest loosened when her mother complained that hospital oatmeal had no business calling itself food. "There's my girl," Denise said as Annie entered. "And she remembered my glasses. Now I can read whatever they try to make me sign." Ruth smiled. "That is exactly the spirit I hoped you would have today." The discharge doctor explained that Denise could go home if she rested, completed her medication, and returned if her breathing worsened. She was not to work in the cold packing area until cleared at a follow-up appointment. Denise accepted the instructions without arguing this time. Annie knew that meant she was already calculating the lost wages. When the nurse left, William stepped forward. "Mrs. Brooks, the guest house remains available for the 3 nights we discussed. After that, you make your own decision." Denise adjusted her glasses. "And what does it cost?" "Nothing. Nothing usually has small print." William took that question seriously. "Then there should be papers saying exactly what it does and does not mean." Ruth turned toward him. "Prepared by whom?" He hesitated only briefly. "You are right. Not by my lawyer alone. Denise and Annie should see and approve every word first." Denise nodded once. "Now that sounds closer to respect." That afternoon, Annie helped her mother settle into the guest house bedroom. Denise protested until a coughing spell ended the debate. Annie placed the antibiotics and a glass of water on the bedside table, then returned to the kitchen to find an envelope lying beside the fruit bowl. Her name and her mother's name were typed across the front. Inside was a multi-page agreement bearing the letterhead of Harrison Capital Group. She read the first paragraph, then the second. Temporary housing assistance. Confidentiality. Termination at the discretion of the property owner. By the time William knocked at the door 20 minutes later, Annie had packed her borrowed clothes back into Lily's tote and placed the agreement on the table. "You said we would choose," she told him when he entered. "So why is my mother's life already printed on your company paper?" William stopped in the doorway. His gaze moved from Annie's packed tote to the agreement on the table, then to Denise, who had pushed herself upright in the bedroom doorway, with one hand braced against the frame. "I did not send that here," he said. Annie let out a short breath. "It has your company's name on every page. I asked my office to prepare something simple, so there would be no confusion about the housing arrangement. I did not approve those terms, but somebody believed those terms were normal." Annie tapped the first page with 2 fingers. Confidentiality. Termination whenever the property owner decides. My mother gets sick at work, and 12 hours later, we are being told we can be removed from a roof if we say the wrong thing. Denise crossed the room slowly, carrying her hospital discharge folder under one arm. "Let me see it." "Mama, you should sit down." "I can read sitting down." Annie pulled out a chair for her. Denise lowered herself carefully, adjusted her glasses, and began with the first line. William remained standing near the door. Ruth, who had been parking her car, entered a minute later and understood the room before anyone explained it. "What happened?" she asked. Annie slid the agreement toward her. "Apparently we were given choices right up until somebody printed them." Ruth read the title, then looked at William. "Did you instruct counsel to include a non-disclosure clause?" "No." "Did you tell them Annie and Denise were involved in a potential dispute with Northlake?" "I told my office only that a family needed temporary use of the guest house." Ruth's expression did not ease. "Then your office treats ordinary kindness like risk management by habit." William looked at the agreement again. The words seemed to trouble him more now that Denise's tired hands were holding them. "I should have spoken to both of you before making any call." "Yes," Annie said. "You should have." From the bedroom, Denise's inhaler sat beside a glass of water. She coughed once into her elbow, waited for it to pass, then placed the pages flat on the table. "Mr. Harrison, maybe you meant to help. I can accept that. But I spent 11 years signing whatever Northlake placed in front of me because I needed hours. I signed forms saying overtime was voluntary when saying no meant my name disappeared from the schedule. I am not leaving a hospital bed to sign another document somebody else decided was good for me." William met her eyes. "You will not have to." He crossed to the table, picked up the agreement, and tore it once down the middle. The sound was clean and sudden. He tore it again, then set the pieces beside the fruit bowl. Annie watched him. "Destroying it does not mean it never happened." "No," he said. "It means I cannot pretend an apology fixes the way it happened." Ruth removed a yellow legal pad from her folder and laid it in front of Denise. "Then start again. Their words, not yours." William pulled out the remaining chair but did not sit until Denise gave a slight nod. Annie stayed standing beside her mother, one hand resting on the back of the chair. Denise read the blank page as if it carried as much danger as the printed agreement had. 3 nights, she said, starting last night. Annie picked up the pen. 3 nights of temporary lodging, she wrote. "No charge," Denise added. "No repayment later, no favors owed," William said. Agreed. No picture of us, no names in your company newsletter, no holiday donation story, no people showing up asking how grateful we are. His face tightened, not at her words but at the fact that she needed to say them. Agreed. Annie wrote each line slowly, leaving enough space that nothing could later be squeezed between them. Ruth said, "No communication with Northlake regarding Denise without her knowledge, unless there is an immediate medical emergency." Denise nodded. "Put that in." William leaned forward. "Mrs. Brooks, I need to be honest. If Northlake is connected to my business, I may need to speak with them about my own company's dealings." "Then you speak about your business," Denise said. "You do not speak for me." "I understand." Annie looked at him. "Do you?" William did not defend himself. "I am trying to." That answer seemed to satisfy Ruth more than a promise would have. When the page was complete, Denise read every line aloud. Her voice tired midway through, but she refused Annie's offer to finish. At the bottom, she signed her name first. Annie signed beneath it. William signed last. Ruth took a photograph of the page with Denise's phone after Annie retrieved it from the hospital bag. Then she handed the original to Denise. "You keep it," William said. Denise folded the paper once and slipped it into her discharge folder. "I intended to." A quiet knock came at the front door. Annie looked through the glass before opening it. Lily stood on the step holding a covered casserole dish and a brown paper bag. "Mrs. K." Annie stepped aside. "My mother is awake." Lily entered, then noticed the torn agreement on the counter. Her eyes flicked toward her father. William stood. "I made a mistake." Lily did not ask which one. Something in her expression suggested she had learned there were several kinds. Denise called from the table, "You must be Lily. Come, let me thank you properly for the scarf." Lily approached with the casserole dish in both hands. "You don't have to thank me. It belonged to my mom. She liked people using things instead of saving them for no reason." Denise touched the cream wool around Annie's neck. "Your mother raised a thoughtful girl." Lily looked down. "She did most of it before she got sick." The sentence changed the room. William looked toward his daughter, but Lily busied herself placing the food on the counter. Annie recognized the movement. It was what she did whenever someone asked if Denise was all right and the honest answer felt too large to give. "Do you want help finding plates?" Annie asked. Lily nodded, grateful for the easier question. Together they opened cupboards until they found 4 plain white plates. Ruth declined food and left after reminding Denise to rest and Annie to photograph every Northlake message before responding to anything. William put on his coat. "I will leave you to eat." Lily looked at him. "Aren't you staying?" He seemed caught off guard. "I thought they might prefer privacy." Denise studied him over the top of her glasses. "A man who tears up a bad agreement can sit down for a slice of pot pie, provided he does not make speeches over it." For the first time, Annie saw William almost smile. They ate at the small kitchen table. Denise managed only a few bites, but praised the crust in a way that made Lily promise to tell Mrs. Keating. Annie noticed William ask his daughter whether she wanted more before serving himself. Lily seemed to notice too. When Denise grew tired, Annie helped her back to bed. By the time she returned, Lily was gathering plates while William stood beside the sink, uncertain whether to help or stay out of the way. Lily handed him a dish towel. "You can dry." He accepted it. Annie stood in the hallway, the signed page safe inside her mother's folder, and the torn pages still visible in the trash. The house was borrowed. The trust was not complete. But for that evening, nobody was asking her mother to work, apologize, or sign away her voice. From the bedroom, Denise called, "Annie, baby. Before I fall asleep, bring me my work bag. There is something in there you need to see." Annie's eyes moved to the worn Northlake bag beside the sofa. William stopped drying the plate in his hands. Annie carried the Northlake bag into the bedroom and set it beside her mother's knees. The bag had once been black, but years of factory dust and winter salt had turned the fabric gray at the seams. Denise rested one hand on it without opening it right away. "Close the door partway," she said. Annie did, leaving enough space to hear Lily and William moving dishes in the kitchen. "What is it?" Denise unzipped the front pocket and removed a small envelope folded in half. Inside were 3 time slips, a printed schedule, and several pieces of paper clipped together. She handed them to Annie. "I kept telling myself I was holding on to these in case things got worse," Denise said. Truth is, things were already worse. I just wasn't ready to say it out loud. Annie unfolded the schedule first. Her mother's name was marked beside 6 consecutive evening shifts, 4 of them extended past midnight. 2 had handwritten initials beside the word overtime. You worked all of these? Denise nodded. You told me you only picked up 1 extra night. I told you enough to keep you from worrying. That didn't keep me from worrying. It kept me from knowing. Denise let that land. Her face, still tired from the hospital, seemed older under the bedside lamp. I know. Annie lifted one of the smaller slips. What is this? Temperature log from the cold room. Marlene made copies before management replaced the sheet on the wall. Annie read the dates. For several shifts, the recorded temperature in the packing area had fallen well below the usual range printed at the top of the form. Beside one date, someone had written, heat vent not working near line 4. Line 4 is yours. Most nights. And they left you there sick? Denise glanced toward the partly closed door. It wasn't just me. Annie sat on the edge of the bed. There are women on that shift who have been there longer than I have, Denise continued. Marlene has arthritis in both hands. Gloria wears a brace under her glove because she hurt her wrist lifting a case last spring. Teresa has a little boy with asthma, so she takes every extra hour they give her. Most of us are women. Most are black or Hispanic. Most cannot miss a check and still keep a roof. Did Richard know? Richard knows who needs the job badly enough not to argue. From the kitchen, a plate clicked softly against the counter. Annie wondered whether William could hear them. For once, she did not care. Denise reached into the bag again and pulled out her phone. Look at the messages under Supervisor Cole. Annie opened the thread. The first messages sounded ordinary. Requests for availability. Schedule reminders. A note about arriving early during the holiday rush. Then the tone shifted. Need all scheduled staff on floor tonight. No call-outs unless admitted to hospital. 2 days later, anyone declining overtime this week should understand January hours are under review. The message sent the afternoon Denise collapsed was shorter. We are short again. You need to stay through close. Take something for the cough and get through the shift. Annie felt heat rise behind her eyes. He wrote this? He didn't think I would show it to anybody. He told you to take medicine and keep working. He told everyone something like that at one time or another, usually face-to-face where there was no record. This time he got careless. Annie stood too quickly, still holding the phone. We need to call somebody. Ruth. A lawyer. The labor board. Somebody tonight. Denise reached for her wrist. Her grip was weak. But Annie stopped. Listen to me first. Being right is not the same as being safe. If North Lake fires me, they do not have to say it is because I got sick. They can say attendance, performance, restructuring. If people speak up and nothing happens, they are the ones who lose hours. So everybody just keeps letting him do it? No, everybody keeps feeding children and paying rent while they figure out what they can risk. The words settled over Annie's anger and made it heavier. There was a soft knock on the doorframe. Ruth stood just outside the bedroom. Behind her, Lily remained at the sink. William was nearer the table, a dish towel still in one hand. I did not mean to overhear, Ruth said. But if you are discussing records, I should tell you not to send or alter anything from that phone. Photograph each message and keep the original device safe. Denise nodded. I was going to ask for your help tomorrow. You have it tonight, if you want it. William stepped into view. Mrs. Brooks, I need to ask one question. Did Northlake know you were ill before your shift began? Denise looked at him for a long moment. I told my line supervisor I had a fever. He said Richard had already made it clear there were no replacements coming, and anyone leaving early would have it noted. William's face became still. Noted how? The kind of note that turns into fewer hours. The kind nobody puts in writing. He looked at the phone in Annie's hand. Except this time, Annie rose from the bed and walked toward him. You said you had business with Northlake. I do. How much business? William did not answer fast enough. Lily had turned from the sink now, watching her father. Annie stepped into the kitchen, carrying Denise's phone and the temperature logs. How much, Mr. Harrison? A distribution agreement is being prepared, he said. My company would handle regional logistics for several of their product lines. Would you make money from it? Yes. Her fingers tightened around the papers, while my mother stood in a cold room with a fever because that company told her she couldn't leave. I did not know that was happening. But you knew enough to sign a deal with them. William opened his mouth, then closed it. Ruth did not help him. Lily looked down at the dishwater. Denise coughed from the bedroom. Annie immediately turned back, but her mother lifted a hand to show she was all right. Annie, Denise said, bring me my water. Annie filled the glass from the kitchen tap. When she brought it to the bed, Denise took a slow sip, then placed it on the nightstand. Do not decide tonight what kind of man he is, Denise said quietly. Let him decide that himself now that he knows. The guest house went silent. William folded the dish towel once and set it beside the sink. His eyes returned to the records in Annie's hand. I want copies of those, he said. Annie held them closer to her chest. Why? So I can find out what Northlake put in front of my company and what they kept hidden. Ruth stepped between the question and the answer. Not tonight. Denise needs rest. Annie needs time to copy everything for herself first. Nothing leaves this house until they are ready. William nodded, but Annie saw something in his face that had not been there outside his car. Not guilt alone. Recognition. For him, Northlake was no longer a name waiting on a contract. For Annie, that did not make him innocent. It only meant he had reached the moment when looking away would become a choice. Ruth photographed every page on the kitchen table before anyone went to bed. The temperature logs, Denise's schedule, the messages from Richard Cole and the hospital discharge instructions were copied into a folder on Annie's phone, then emailed to an address Ruth controlled through the Foundation's legal clinic. Not William's office, Ruth said when Annie glanced at him. Not Northlake. Not yet. Somewhere neither of them can reach by accident or by influence. William accepted the exclusion without argument. Lily had gone back to the main house after helping clear the dishes, but he remained near the guest house door, coat folded over one arm, as if leaving too quickly would prove he had wanted an easier version of the truth. Denise leaned back in the sofa chair, pale from the effort of staying awake. Mr. Harrison, I appreciate what you did for my daughter. I do. She might not have made it home in that storm. William lowered his eyes. But gratitude does not mean I can live under your roof while you decide whether what happened to me is bad for business. Annie looked at her mother. Mama, you are not strong enough to go back to the apartment tonight. I know. Denise took a slow breath. We stay until morning, then we go home. William nodded once. I will have a car available. We will take the bus if it is running, Annie said. Annie, Denise murmured. No, Mama. He needs to understand. Every time he offers something now, I have to wonder whether he is helping us or trying to make this feel smaller. William flinched, but Annie did not look away. The warmth of the guest house, the clean clothes, the food and the scarf around her neck were real. So was the contract on his phone. So was her mother's shift log. You are right, he said. The answer disarmed her more than an excuse would have. Ruth closed her folder. Then the decent thing tonight is to let Denise rest and let Annie be angry without asking her to make you feel better. I was not going to. Ruth looked at him. Good. After William left, Annie helped her mother back into bed. Denise settled beneath the quilt, breathing more comfortably than she had at the hospital but still coughing whenever she tried to speak too long. You should sleep too, Denise said. I will. You have that look. What look? The one you had when you were 12, and the landlord tried to charge us for the broken hallway window. You found 3 neighbors who saw his repairman break it. Then you lined them up outside his office after school. Annie sat on the edge of the bed. He was trying to take your grocery money, and you were born with an argument ready. Denise reached for her hand. I love that about you. I also need you to understand that Mr. Harrison may not have known. He knew enough to make money. Yes, and now he knows more. We find out what he does with it. Annie looked toward the cream scarf draped over the back of the chair. I hate that Lily is part of this. She didn't do anything. Kind people sometimes come from houses where unkind things were allowed to happen. Denise squeezed her fingers. That does not make kindness false. It makes life complicated. By morning, the storm had cleared into a hard gray sky. The plows had opened the main roads, piling snow along the curbs and ridges taller than Annie's knees. She had just packed Denise's medicine and discharge papers when there was a knock at the door. William stood outside with a set of car keys in one hand and a sealed envelope in the other. "The emergency key to this guest house," he said, offering the envelope to Denise. As promised, no one entered last night. Denise accepted it, but did not sit down again. She had dressed in the clean cardigan Annie brought from home, and her North Lake work badge was zipped inside her bag. "We are leaving," she said. "I understand." William handed the keys to Annie instead. "The car is yours for the trip. My driver can take you home and leave immediately." Annie shook her head. "We can manage." Denise touched her arm. "The doctor said no standing around in cold air. Managing does not mean refusing every practical thing." Annie knew the correction was meant for more than this car ride. She took the keys reluctantly. Only home," William said. His phone rang before they reached the door. The screen displayed a name Annie recognized from the message she had seen in his car. "Grant Mercer." William answered. "Yes." The voice on the other end was loud enough for Annie to hear fragments. "Signing schedule, North Lake. Press release. Delay not advisable." William turned slightly away, but not far enough to conceal his answer. "Put the signing on hold." A pause. "No, Grant. Do not tell Richard there is a minor concern. Tell him I require employment records, safety reports, and all internal complaints connected to the packing floor before my name goes on anything." Annie felt her mother go still beside her. Grant's reply came sharper now. William's expression changed. "I am aware of the size of the deal," he said. "That is why I want to know what it is built on." He ended the call before Grant finished speaking. Denise adjusted the strap of her bag over her shoulder. "That was a beginning." William looked at her. "It should have happened before you were carried off that floor." "Yes," she said. "It should have." Annie helped her mother into the car. William stood on the snowy drive while they pulled away, growing smaller in the rear window, until the guest house and the large brick home disappeared behind bare trees. Their apartment felt colder after Winnetka. The radiator knocked as if it resented being asked to work, and the stairwell smelled of wet boots and old paint. Still, when Denise put her key into the lock, her shoulders eased. "Home," she said. Annie carried the bags inside, helped her mother settle on the sofa, and placed the medication beside a glass of water. On the kitchen table sat her nursing application, exactly where she had left it before walking into the snow. She moved it aside and placed Ruth's folder in the center of the table. Denise watched her. "What are you doing?" "Making a list of the women you said were hurt there." "Annie, I'm not calling reporters. I'm not going to the factory." She found a pen. "I just want their names, if they're willing to talk." Her mother looked tired, but not surprised. Before Denise could answer, her phone rang inside the work bag. The caller ID read North Lake Human Resources. Annie and Denise looked at each other. Denise reached for the phone and answered on speaker. A woman introduced herself in a pleasant, rehearsed voice. "Mrs. Brooks, we understand you experienced a medical episode during your shift. We need to schedule a meeting regarding your attendance status and your ability to meet the essential demands of your position." Denise tightened her hand around the phone. Annie picked up the pen. "Tell her," Denise said quietly, her eyes fixed on the table, "that I will not attend any meeting alone." Annie leaned toward the phone. "My mother will attend with someone advising her. Please send the purpose of the meeting in writing, along with any policy you believe applies to her absence." The woman on the line paused. Her voice had been pleasant when Denise was alone on the other end. Now it sharpened by half a degree. "May I ask who I'm speaking with?" "Her daughter, Mrs. Brooks. Company matters should be discussed directly with the employee." Denise lifted her chin. "Then discuss it directly with me. I will not attend alone, and I want everything you just said emailed to me." Another pause. "We will follow up." The call ended. For several seconds, neither of them moved. The apartment radiator knocked beneath the window. Somewhere upstairs, a child ran across a floor, and a woman called after him to put on socks. Denise lowered herself onto the sofa. "They never called me Mrs. Brooks on the line." Annie placed the phone on the table beside Ruth's folder. "They know you have something now. They know I was taken to the hospital from their floor. That is enough to make them careful." "Good. Let them be careful." Denise gave her daughter a tired look. "Careful people can still hurt you, Annie. Sometimes they are better at it." Annie reached for the phone again. I'm calling Ruth. Ruth answered before the second ring. She listened without interrupting while Annie repeated the human resources call, including the exact phrases about attendance status and essential demands. When Annie finished, Ruth said, "Do not call them back. Do not meet them without support. Have your mother write down what time they called and what they said while it is fresh." "I'm right here," Denise said toward the speaker. "I know, Denise. How are you feeling?" "Better than they hoped and worse than I'd like." Ruth gave a soft sound that might have been approval. "That sounds honest. Rest today. Tomorrow, if you agree, I will come by with a worker advocate I trust. We can review your messages and talk about whether any of your coworkers are willing to document their own experiences." Denise looked at Annie's pen already poised above the paper. "My daughter started a list before the phone stopped ringing. I suspected she might." Annie wrote the time of the call at the top of a clean sheet. "Mama mentioned Marlene, Gloria, and Teresa." Denise rested her head back against the cushion. "Marlene will speak if she thinks it protects somebody else. Gloria may be afraid. Teresa has a child. You do not push any of them." "I won't," Ruth said. "That is important, Annie. Their stories belong to them. You ask. You listen. You never promise a result you cannot control." "I understand." After the call, Annie warmed soup from the can she had meant to share with Denise the night before. She placed crackers on a plate and brought everything to the sofa. Her mother ate slowly, stopping once to cough into a tissue, but the sound was less harsh than it had been before the hospital. "You should be working on your application," Denise said between spoonfuls. "I will. Not after this is all finished. It may not finish quickly." Annie stirred her own soup without eating. "How am I supposed to write about caring for people while pretending this is not happening to you?" "By remembering that your life cannot be only a reaction to what happened to me." Annie met her eyes. "And yours cannot be only what that factory decides you are worth." Denise looked down at the bowl in her hands. "Then I suppose we both have homework." Across town, William Harrison was seated in a conference room on the 32nd floor of Harrison Capital when Grant Mercer placed a leather presentation folder in front of him. "You are delaying a contract worth more than $300 million because a worker became ill during flu season," Grant said. William did not open the folder. Behind Grant, the windows showed Lake Michigan under a white sky, the water indistinguishable from the clouds at the horizon. She collapsed on the packing floor after being ordered to work through a fever. That is the daughter's version. It is in a text message from her supervisor. Grant's expression barely changed. "You have seen the message? I have been told it exists. By the family you housed after picking the girl up on a roadside." Grant pulled out a chair and sat without being invited. "William, listen to how this sounds. A vulnerable young woman enters your life during a storm, and within 48 hours you are threatening a major transaction on the strength of her mother's grievance." William's fingers tightened on the table. "Her grievance began before she knew my name. Perhaps, but your involvement changes everything. It should change whether I sign blindly." Grant leaned forward. "Richard Cole runs a manufacturing operation, not a church supper. Seasonal overtime is part of the industry. People complain. People get sick. That does not make him a criminal." William opened a thin file beside him. It contained the public documents his office had already gathered. North Lake safety summaries, staff retention figures, promotional materials about job creation in underserved neighborhoods. All polished, all clean enough to reassure investors. "I want raw time records for the packing line," he said. "Temperature logs, sick leave complaints, disciplinary actions after employees refused overtime, and any internal correspondence referencing Denise Brooks." Grant sat back. "That request will tell Richard there is a problem. There is a problem. It will tell him the problem has reached you." William looked up. "That appears to bother you more." Grant gave him the patient expression he used when board members asked moral questions during profitable meetings. "I am trying to protect your company from a decision made while you are emotionally compromised." The words settled in the room. William knew what Grant meant. Margaret. The months since her funeral. Annie in the snow. A sick mother. And a quiet daughter in a guest house. All of it, in Grant's view, belonged to the category of things a sensible man kept away from business. "I spent years approving deals because people like you assured me the unpleasant parts were operational details," William said. "Maybe emotion is not the compromise. Maybe being protected from consequences is. Grant's jaw tightened. Do you want me to tell Cole the deal is suspended? I want you to tell him due diligence has expanded. And if he refuses the records? Then he has answered the first question for us. Grant gathered the presentation folder. At the door, he paused. Be careful, William. Once the public sees you standing beside that family, you may not get to choose what story they tell. When the door closed, William looked at his phone. Lily had sent one message. Is Annie's mom okay? He typed, home and recovering. A moment later, Lily replied, Does Annie need anything? William started to write that he had offered everything he could think of. Then he deleted it. I think she needs people to listen before they decide what she needs. He placed the phone on the table and called his compliance director himself. Back on South Ada Street, Annie was helping Denise sort through old messages when her mother stopped at one name. Gloria Watkins, Denise said. Call her first. She kept copies when they cut her hours last winter. Annie entered the number, then hesitated. Denise placed a hand over hers. Be gentle. Women who have been ignored a long time do not always trust the first person who says they are ready to listen. Annie nodded and pressed call. A woman answered after 4 rings. Hello? Miss Watkins? My name is Annie Brooks. I'm Denise's daughter. There was silence, then concern. Is your mom all right? She's home now. She asked me to call because we need to understand what Northlake has been doing to the women on that line. Gloria did not answer immediately. Then her voice lowered. You better come by tomorrow, she said. And bring something to write with. Your mother is not the first one they tried to work sick. Annie looked at Denise. Her mother closed her eyes, not with relief, but with the weary recognition that the road ahead had just opened wider. Gloria Watkins lived in a brick 2-flat 3 bus stops west of Denise's apartment. By late morning, the sidewalks had been shoveled into narrow paths between banks of dirty snow. Annie walked carefully beside Ruth, holding a canvas tote with her notebook, copies of Denise's messages, and 2 containers of chicken soup Denise had insisted they bring. You never go to someone's home asking them to reopen a wound empty-handed, Denise had said from the sofa. Gloria fed me through 2 double shifts when you were little. At the front door, Gloria opened before Annie finished knocking. She was a broad-shouldered woman with silver braids pulled behind her head and a black brace around her right wrist. Look at you, she said, drawing Annie into a hug before she seemed to remember Annie was no longer a child. Last time I saw you, you were in a cap and gown trying not to cry because your mama cried enough for both of you. She still does that, Annie said. Your mama earned it. Gloria noticed Ruth and nodded politely. You from the foundation? Ruth Coleman. I help workers locate independent legal support. I'm here only if you want me here. Gloria held the door wider. Come in before my heating bill starts climbing over the conversation. Her living room smelled of coffee and menthol rub. A framed photograph of 2 grown sons sat on the mantel beside a small wooden cross. Annie put the soup in the refrigerator while Gloria made room at the table among grocery flyers and a half-finished crossword puzzle. How is Denise? Gloria asked. Resting. The doctor says she should recover if she stays off the packing floor until she's better. Gloria gave a low sound. That floor has made plenty of women worse before it let them get better. Annie opened her notebook. Mama said they cut your hours last winter. Gloria flexed the hand inside the brace. They did more than that. I tore something in my wrist moving frozen cases. I reported it before the shift ended. The next morning, a supervisor told me there was no injury report because I had finished my hours, so it could not have been serious. She pushed back from the table and returned with a plastic grocery bag full of folded papers. I went to urgent care on my own dime. When I asked Northlake to cover it, Richard called me unreliable. After that, 38 hours became 22. Ruth took out a pad. Do you have your schedule from before and after the injury? I kept everyone. Gloria tapped the bag. My husband used to say I saved paper like I expected the world to lie to me someday. Turns out, he knew the world. Annie wrote carefully, asking only what Ruth had advised. Dates, names, who had witnessed the injury, whether Gloria had copies. She did not ask Gloria to accuse anyone beyond what she could prove. As Gloria sorted her records, there was another knock. She looked toward the door. That will be Teresa. I told her Denise was home, and her girl had finally decided to make trouble properly. Miss Gloria, Annie said. Gloria smiled. Honey, trouble is what managers call the truth when it arrives with witnesses. Teresa Alvarez entered carrying a grocery store bakery box and brushing snow from her sleeves. She looked younger than Annie expected, perhaps in her 30s, with worry already settled around her mouth. I cannot stay long, Teresa said. My sister has my son until 1. You do not have to stay at all, Ruth told her. And nothing you say gets used without your agreement. Teresa sat slowly. Denise went down because they made her stay? Annie nodded. She had a fever. Richard texted her to take something for her cough and get through the shift. Teresa pressed her lips together. He said that to my friend Carla when she was pregnant. Not in a text. He knows when to speak instead of write. She reached into her purse and removed her phone. Her hands trembled as she opened a photograph. A red, swollen ankle, resting on a pillow. I slipped near the freezer drain in March. Water had been there since the morning shift. My supervisor said if I reported it as a workplace fall, the line would be shut down and everybody would blame me for losing hours. He gave me a form saying I had aggravated an old injury. Did you sign it? Annie asked. Teresa nodded, ashamed. Ruth leaned forward. Mrs. Alvarez, signing something under pressure does not make the pressure disappear. Do you still have the form? I have a picture. My sister told me to take one before I gave it back. Your sister was wise. Teresa looked at Annie. I am not brave like your mother. My mother was afraid too, Annie said. She still is. The answer eased something in Teresa's face. She forwarded the photograph and agreed Ruth could contact her after she spoke with a worker attorney. By the time Annie and Ruth left Gloria's apartment, the notebook held more than dates. It held the sound of Gloria laughing bitterly when she described being thanked for loyalty before her hours were cut. Teresa apologizing for needing work more than she needed vindication. The names of 2 more women who might speak if someone promised not to expose them alone. Annie called Denise from the sidewalk. How did it go? Her mother asked. Annie watched Ruth scrape ice from the windshield. You were right. It wasn't only you. Denise was quiet. I wish I had been wrong. At Harrison Capital, William had been wishing the same thing for the past hour. His compliance director, Paula Chen, sat across from him with a tablet and a printed file whose top page was marked North Lake Preliminary Review. The records Grant's office sent yesterday were incomplete, Paula said, so I requested the archived correspondence tied to the transaction. William turned the page. What did you find? References to employee complaints that do not appear in the disclosure package. There are also temperature variance reports from the packing department. Several were closed as corrected, though the repair invoices do not support that. Who reviewed the disclosures? Paula hesitated. Grant Mercer signed off on our side. Richard Cole's office certified the information. The office door opened before William could answer. Grant entered without waiting for permission. I heard Paula was conducting an excavation, he said. This is rapidly becoming disproportionate. William held up the file. Why were employee complaints omitted? Grant's gaze flicked toward Paula. Operational grievances are not material to a logistics agreement. A woman collapsed in a cold packing area while sick. One woman, Grant said. Whose daughter is now being advised by people attached to your family foundation. Do you see how this can be made to look? Paula closed her tablet. I can leave. No, William said. Stay. Grant's expression cooled. William placed the temperature reports beside the complaint references. I want every North Lake document preserved. No deletions, no amended summaries, no calls warning Richard to clean up his files. You are treating a partner like a criminal. I am treating a partner like someone who has not told us the truth. Grant stepped closer to the desk. Be certain this is worth what it may cost you. William looked at the signature line on the incomplete disclosure package. Grant's signature sat there in clean black ink. It is beginning to cost me more that I trusted you. At the Brooks apartment, Annie had just returned with Ruth when she found her mother sitting at the kitchen table, an envelope open before her. Denise did not speak as Annie came in. She simply pushed the letter across the table. North Lake Foods thanked her for her years of service, then stated that her inability to fulfill scheduled shifts and meet job requirements required immediate termination. Annie read it once, then again. At the bottom, The date showed it had been prepared the same morning Human Resources called to request a meeting. Denise folded her hands tightly in her lap. "They never wanted to talk to me," she said. "They wanted to make it look like they had." Annie sat down across from her mother and read the termination letter a third time, slower than before, as though the cruelty might become less deliberate if she gave each sentence enough attention. It did not. Northlake thanked Denise for her years of service, referred to her hospitalization as an inability to fulfill scheduled responsibilities, and ended her employment before she had been given the meeting Human Resources claimed to be arranging. Ruth removed her glasses and held out her hand. "May I?" Denise slid the letter across the table. Ruth examined the date, the signature, and the paragraph about attendance. "Do you still have the email asking you to meet?" Annie lifted her mother's phone. "And the call log from this morning." "Good. Keep both. This letter may tell us more about their fear than their policy." Denise gave a dry laugh, then covered her mouth as a cough interrupted it. "Fear still signs the paper that stops my paycheck." Annie reached for the soup pot on the stove, but Denise shook her head. "I am not hungry. You need to eat with your medicine. I know what I need." Denise's voice rose, then weakened. She looked away at once. "I'm sorry, baby. You don't have to apologize to me. I do when I make you carry the anger I'm too tired to hold." Annie folded the termination letter and placed it beside the timesheets. "Then let me hold it until you feel stronger." A knock sounded at the apartment door. Ruth stood before Annie could rise. Through the peephole, she saw a man in a dark wool coat holding a microphone, while a woman behind him balanced a camera on her shoulder. "Do not open it," Ruth said. The man knocked again. "Miss Brooks? Annie Brooks? We are with Channel 8. We would like to ask about your connection to William Harrison and allegations concerning Northlake Foods." Denise stared toward the door. "How do they know her name?" Ruth's face hardened. "Someone wanted them to." "Miss Brooks," the reporter called. "Were you and your mother provided housing or financial support by Mr. Harrison after he learned of your mother's complaint?" Annie felt the insult before she had time to sort out its shape. The question was not why Denise had collapsed or why she had been fired. It was whether Annie had found a rich man and used him. She moved toward the door. Ruth caught her arm. "Not like this. Not in a hallway with them choosing every question. I didn't do anything wrong." "I know. That is why you do not hand your truth to strangers who arrived with a story already written." The reporter remained another 5 minutes, calling through the door twice more before the footsteps faded down the stairwell. Denise sat in silence, her hands clasped over the blanket on her lap. "They will call me irresponsible," she said. "They will say I wanted money." Annie knelt beside her. "They can say whatever Richard feeds them. It does not change what he did. It changes what people hear first." Ruth returned to the table and opened her folder. "Then we decide where they hear from you. Williams Hotel is hosting Northlake's pre-signing reception this evening. Investors, local business press, probably city development staff. Richard will be there." Denise looked alarmed. "You are not taking Annie into that room." "I am not taking her anywhere. I am telling her where the people making decisions will be standing." Annie looked at the documents spread across the table. Hospital records, text messages, temperature logs, Gloria's schedules, Teresa's photograph, and her mother's termination letter. "I need copies of everything," she said. Denise closed her eyes. "Annie, they came to our door, Mama. They already decided we were part of the story. I'm not going to hide while Richard gets to tell it." Ruth studied her. "If you go, you stay beside me. You answer only what you choose. You do not accuse beyond the documents. And if it becomes too much, we leave." Annie nodded. Denise reached for her hand. "Wear the warm coat." Despite everything, Annie almost smiled. "I will." That evening, Harrison Grand shone above Michigan Avenue with wreaths in every window, and valet attendants stamping snow from polished shoes. Inside, the lobby carried the smell of evergreen branches and expensive perfume. A string quartet played near a tall Christmas tree, while guests accepted wine from silver trays and talked about job growth, expansion, and community investment. Annie entered beside Ruth wearing her dry parka, black pants, and Lily's cream scarf around her neck. In her canvas tote were the records Denise had trusted her to carry. People noticed her slowly at first, then all at once. Near the far end of the lobby, Richard Cole stood beside Grant Mercer, laughing with a city council aide. When Richard saw Annie, the smile stayed in place but lost its warmth. He murmured something to Grant, then turned toward a reporter standing near the bar. Ruth leaned close to Annie. "He is moving before you speak. Stay calm." They had taken only a few more steps when the reporter from Annie's apartment approached, microphone already raised. "Annie Brooks, were you invited here tonight by William Harrison?" "No," Annie said. "I came to provide documents concerning my mother's employment. Have you been staying on Mr. Harrison's property?" Before Annie could answer, Richard appeared beside the reporter with a concerned expression that looked practiced in mirrors. "This young woman's mother experienced an unfortunate medical incident," he said. "Northlake has attempted to handle it appropriately. It is regrettable if personal assistance from Mr. Harrison has led her to believe public accusations will produce special treatment." Annie stared at him. "Special treatment?" Richard lowered his voice as if speaking gently to someone unreasonable. "Your mother was expected to meet the requirements of her position, as every employee is. She went to work with a fever because your message told her to take something for her cough and finish the shift." The conversation nearest them stopped. The quartet continued playing, but even that seemed farther away. Richard's face changed for less than a second. "I have no idea what message you think you saw." Annie opened her tote. Her hands trembled, but not from cold this time. She placed a printed screenshot of his message on a small reception table beside the termination letter and Denise's hospital discharge instructions. "This one," she said. The reporter's microphone lowered toward the papers. Richard took a step forward. "Those are private employment matters. They became my business when my mother collapsed trying to obey you." More faces turned toward them. Grant was already scanning the lobby, searching for someone who could end the scene quietly. William appeared from the ballroom entrance, Lily close behind him. He saw Annie, the reporter, Richard, and the papers on the table. His first instinct showed in the speed of his steps. He meant to put himself between Annie and the cameras. Annie saw him coming. "Don't stand in front of me," she said. William stopped beside her instead. Richard drew himself upright. "William, I suggest your staff remove this disruption before it damages an important evening." William looked at the termination letter. "Did you fire Denise Brooks today? She failed to meet attendance and performance obligations. She collapsed during a shift you ordered her to finish while sick." Richard turned toward the gathered guests. "This is exactly what happens when emotion is allowed to distort ordinary employment matters." Annie pulled out the timesheets, temperature logs, and the first 3 signed statements Ruth had helped prepare. She arranged them beside her mother's records. "My mother is not an ordinary employment matter," she said, her voice carrying farther now. "She is a woman who worked for your factory 11 years. She packed food in a room cold enough to make sick workers worse. She went in with a fever because you made her believe losing a shift meant losing her future. Then, after she was taken away in an ambulance, you fired her before she could even attend the meeting your office promised." The reporter turned from Annie to Richard. "Mr. Cole, did your plant continue scheduling sick employees in a refrigeration area during the holiday storm?" Richard did not answer. Annie looked at William. "You let me into your car when I was freezing. Are you still going to sign with the man who left women like my mother in the cold every night?" The lobby had gone quiet enough that William could hear the soft scrape of Lily's shoes as she moved closer to Annie. He looked at Grant, then Richard, then the documents spread beneath the holiday lights. "There will be no signing," William said. "Not until an independent review has examined every record connected to Northlake's treatment of its workers." Grant reached his side. "William, this is neither the time nor the setting." William did not take his eyes from Richard. "That appears to be what men say when the truth arrives in a room they paid to make comfortable." Annie stood with the scarf warm against her throat and her mother's termination letter beneath her hand. For the first time since the storm, Richard Cole was not speaking about Denise where she could not answer. He was standing before evidence, witnesses, and cameras, and he no longer controlled the silence. The reporter's question hung in front of Richard Cole, but Grant Mercer moved before Richard answered. He stepped toward William with a smile meant for the cameras and placed one hand lightly at his elbow. "Mr. Harrison is responding to serious concerns that have only just been brought to his attention," Grant said. "Out of respect for the employee and her family, we will not conduct a workplace investigation in the middle of a holiday reception." Annie watched him try to place a lid back over the room. His voice was smooth. His suit had not picked up a speck of snow. To people who had not seen Denise in a hospital bed, he might have sounded responsible. Ruth moved beside Annie and collected the original papers before anyone could reach them. "Copies remain available for the appropriate authorities," she said, loud enough for the reporter to hear. Richard turned to William. "We need to speak privately." "No," Annie said before William could answer. "He needs to hear you where everyone else can hear you." Richard looked at her as though she were a child interrupting adults. "Miss Brooks, I understand this has been emotional for you, but your mother's employment record is not something you are qualified to interpret." Annie felt Lily move closer at her side. "My mother was qualified to work 11 years for you," Annie said. "She was qualified enough to stand in your cold packing room while she could barely breathe. Now that she has papers you do not like, suddenly nobody in my family is qualified to speak." A few people near the reception table lowered their wine glasses. The reporter raised the microphone again. "Mr. Cole, did you personally send the text telling Mrs. Brooks to take something for her cough and complete her shift?" Richard's face remained controlled, but a pulse moved in his temple. "I cannot authenticate a printed screenshot presented in a public lobby." "I can," Annie said. "It is still on her phone." Grant turned sharply to William. "End this now." "Not because she is wrong or right, but because this is no way to handle exposure for either side." William looked at him. "Exposure? You know what I mean." "Yes," William said. "I believe I do." He signaled to the hotel manager, a woman standing near the ballroom doors. "Give Miss Brooks and Mrs. Coleman a private room where they can secure their documents. No one from North Lake enters unless they approve it. No one from my company either." The manager nodded and approached Ruth quietly. Annie did not move yet. "My mother was fired today." William looked at the letter on the table. "She was supposed to be asked to a meeting," Annie continued. "Instead, they made a letter in the morning and called later so it would sound fair." William turned to Richard. "Is that true?" Richard spread his hands. "Denise Brooks had attendance issues. A medical event does not erase the operational requirements of a food production plant. She was hospitalized from your floor, and we followed procedure." "Procedure," Annie said. The word came out quieter than everything else she had said, but it carried farther. "That is what people say when they want cruelty to sound organized." Richard took one step toward her. Ruth blocked his path without touching him. William's voice changed. "Do not go near her." Richard stopped. "You are making an extraordinary mistake. I think I made it before tonight." Grant pressed his lips together, then said, "William, a word, now." This time William followed him, but only as far as a sitting area visible from the lobby. Richard joined them. Annie remained near Ruth and Lily, close enough to see the three men, not close enough to hear it first. Lily reached for Annie's hand, then paused. "Is it okay?" Annie looked at the offered hand and nodded. Lily's fingers were warm around hers. "You should not have had to do that alone," Lily said. "I wasn't alone." Annie glanced at her mother's records. "My mother was standing there with me." Across the lobby, Grant leaned close to William. His voice rose despite his effort to keep it contained. "Do you understand what you just threatened? Northlake supports a regional distribution expansion, 4 warehouse contracts, and hundreds of jobs tied to your logistics network." William said something Annie could not hear. Richard answered more loudly. "Your concern is one employee who became ill during the busiest week of the year. We can make that right." William's head turned. "Make it right?" Richard lowered his tone, but the room had gone quiet enough that Annie caught pieces. "Medical costs, compensation, private accommodation, no need for spectacle." Ruth's mouth tightened. Grant glanced toward Annie before continuing. "The girl has college plans, does she not? Nursing? A scholarship can be established without anyone admitting fault. Her mother can receive a severance package, continued coverage for a period, perhaps housing assistance. There is a humane solution here if you stop letting this become a public crusade." Annie felt Lily's hand tighten in hers. William stood motionless for several seconds. Then he asked, clearly enough for everyone nearest them to hear, "And the other women?" Richard's expression flattened. "What other women?" "The women in those statements. The workers on the cold line. The people whose complaints were never disclosed to my company." Grant replied, Those can be reviewed internally. Quietly, William said. Professionally. Annie understood then. They were not denying her mother had been harmed. They were calculating how much it would cost to make her stop saying so. Richard walked back toward her, keeping a polite distance this time. Miss Brooks, I believe your mother deserves support while she recovers. I also believe you deserve the education she clearly wants for you. There is no virtue in making your lives harder to satisfy people who enjoy public outrage. Annie released Lily's hand. My mother's life got harder in your factory, she said. Not in this lobby. I am offering a way forward. For us? For everyone involved. No, Annie said. For everyone embarrassed. His smile disappeared. Grant addressed William. Think carefully. She was cold for one night, William. You cannot burn an empire over one night in the snow. The word seemed to strike William more deeply than any accusation had. He looked toward Annie. At the cream scarf around her neck and the papers Ruth held close against her folder. She was cold for one night, William said. Her mother has been standing in it for years. He faced Grant and Richard. There will be no private offer tonight. No severance in exchange for silence. No scholarship tied to disappearing records. My compliance director will receive every Northlake file before morning, and outside counsel chosen without your involvement will preserve the evidence. Grant stared at him. You are choosing a very expensive conscience. William's answer was quiet. No, I am finally admitting what the cheaper one has already cost. Grant's face hardened. Then you should be prepared to explain this decision to your board. I will, William said, and you should be prepared to explain why employee complaints were withheld from me. For the first time that evening, Grant had no polished answer. Richard turned away from the cameras, speaking rapidly into his phone as he crossed the lobby. The reception did not resume. Guests stayed where they were, watching a celebration become something none of the invitations had promised. Ruth guided Annie into the private room the hotel manager had opened for them. Lily followed with a glass of water. Once the door closed, Annie set both hands on the table to steady herself. You were wonderful, Lily said. Annie shook her head. I was angry. Sometimes that is what wonderful looks like. Ruth took the water from Lily and handed it to Annie. Drink. Then call your mother before she hears any version of tonight from television. Denise answered on the first ring. Annie? I'm all right, Mama. Did you see him? Yes, Richard was there. And? Annie looked through the glass wall at William standing alone while staff quietly cleared untouched champagne from the lobby. He tried to say you could not do the work anymore. I showed them the texts and the hospital papers. Mr. Harrison stopped the signing. Denise was quiet long enough that Annie heard the hum of their apartment radiator through the phone. Did you speak for yourself? Denise asked. Yes. Then I am proud of you. Come home when Ruth says it is safe. William did not attempt to speak to Annie before she left. He only asked the hotel manager to make sure Ruth's car came through the covered exit, away from the reporters gathering outside. That restraint mattered to Annie more than another apology would have. The next morning, there was a knock at the apartment door. Annie looked through the peephole and saw William alone, without a driver or lawyer, carrying a thick file box. Denise was seated at the kitchen table in a robe and cardigan, her breathing steadier than it had been the day before. Let him in, she said. William stepped inside and remained near the door until Denise pointed to an empty chair. What is in the box? She asked. Records my company obtained overnight. Northlake temperature reports, internal emails, altered safety summaries and correspondence involving Grant Mercer. He placed the box on the floor beside the table rather than in front of Denise. There are references to your shift and to complaints from other workers. Annie felt her stomach tighten. Why bring them here? Because they are evidence of what happened to your mother before they are a problem for my company. Denise adjusted her glasses. And what happens when your lawyers decide giving us these records was a mistake? They may decide that. William folded his hands once, then stopped as though even the gesture seemed too formal in their kitchen. I have already arranged for copies to be preserved by outside counsel and delivered to an attorney Ruth identified for the workers. No one can make the box disappear by taking it from this apartment. Ruth arrived 15 minutes later and confirmed the attorney had received the files. She opened one folder while Annie poured coffee for Denise and tea for herself. There were emails from Richard's office describing cold room complaints as seasonal discomfort, a maintenance request postponed twice, and a message instructing supervisors to avoid creating written records that connected illness to work conditions. Denise read only 3 pages before setting them down. They knew. William did not soften it. Yes. And your people knew some of it? Yes. She studied him. Did you? No. But I made it easy not to know. Denise gave a single nod. It was not forgiveness. Annie was glad he understood that. Ruth closed the folder. The formal signing event is scheduled for this afternoon. It has already been announced publicly. Richard will likely claim last night was an emotional misunderstanding, unless the documents are placed on record. William looked at Denise. I intend to cancel the contract publicly and disclose my company's failure in reviewing Northlake. Do what you need to do about your name, Denise said. But do not use mine as the story of how you became a better man. I will not. Annie spoke before fear could stop her. I want to go. Denise turned toward her. You have already stood in front of enough cameras. No. Last night I answered a man who insulted you. Today I want people to hear what happened without him shaping the question first. Her mother's eyes filled, but her voice stayed steady. Then I am going too. You need rest. I can rest in a chair. I cannot sit home while my daughter carries my name into that room alone. That afternoon, the ballroom at Harrison Grand was no longer arranged as a reception. Rows of chairs faced a stage bearing the logos of Harrison Capital and Northlake Foods. Reporters filled the aisles. Richard sat near the front with counsel at his side. Grant stood at the rear, speaking into his phone until William entered, and the room quieted. Denise sat beside Ruth in a wheelchair borrowed from the hotel only because the walk from the lobby would have tired her. Lily took the seat on her other side. Annie sat beside her mother, the cream scarf around her neck and the orange medicine bottle in her coat pocket. William reached the podium with a prepared speech in his hand. He looked at it once, then folded it and placed it aside. I was scheduled to announce a partnership today, he began. Instead, I am here to state why that partnership will not proceed. Richard shifted in his chair. Northlake Foods provided incomplete and misleading information concerning workplace safety and employee treatment. My own company failed to examine those omissions with the seriousness they deserved. I approved a process that treated labor conditions as a footnote to profit. A reporter raised a hand, but William continued. Before we build another warehouse door, this city deserves to know who was left outside the old ones. He described the preserved records, the delayed repairs, the retaliation against employees who became ill or reported injuries. He named Richard Cole's role. He named Grant Mercer's failure to disclose concerns. Then he named his own. I did not send Denise Brooks onto a cold packing floor while she was sick, but I was prepared to profit from the company that did. That responsibility is mine. Richard rose. This is defamatory and reckless. William looked directly at him. Then you may answer the documents under oath. 2 officials seated near the aisle stepped toward Richard's counsel, requesting that he remain available after the event. Grant lowered his phone. His face drained of color. William turned from the microphone toward Annie. Miss Brooks, your mother's experience is not mine to narrate. If you wish to speak, the podium is yours. Annie looked at Denise. Her mother reached over and squeezed her hand. Go tell it plain. Annie stood. Her knees trembled once, then steadied as she stepped onto the stage. She placed the medicine bottle on the podium, followed by Denise's time card, termination letter, and 3 of the portraits she had drawn. My mother went to work sick because missing a shift could mean missing rent, Annie said. I walked through a snowstorm carrying medicine because I knew she would stand there hurting before she let me lose our home. The room held still. She is not weak. Gloria Watkins is not weak. Teresa Alvarez is not weak. They were treated as if needing a paycheck meant they had agreed to be harmed. Annie rested one hand beside the medicine bottle. Justice is not fair when the poor must nearly die before the powerful agree to look at them. Her eyes found Richard in the front row. You did not lose workers today. You lost the right to keep them silent. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Denise rose halfway from her chair, one hand holding Ruth's arm, and began to clap. Others followed. Not quickly, not politely, but one by one, until the sound filled the ballroom and Annie could finally look at her mother without seeing fear first. The applause did not end the investigation. It only made it impossible for anyone to pretend there was nothing to investigate. By the following morning, Northlake's packing line had been ordered to preserve its records, while state labor officials and workplace safety investigators reviewed the temperature logs, schedules, and messages Ruth's attorney submitted on behalf of Denise, Gloria, Teresa, and 7 other workers who came forward after seeing Annie speak. Richard Cole was placed on administrative leave, then removed after an internal review found altered reports and retaliatory scheduling decisions. Grant Mercer resigned before Harrison Capital's board could dismiss him, though William made certain the preserved correspondence included Grant's name wherever it belonged. For several weeks, reporters continued calling. Annie answered only once more, beside her mother and Ruth, in the office of the workers' attorney. She did not discuss William's car or the guest house. She spoke about sick leave, cold floors, and the women who had kept food moving through the city while being treated as replaceable. Denise listened with her hands folded in her lap. Her cough faded with medication and rest, but the doctor was clear that returning to the refrigerated line would risk another collapse. She grieved that fact more than Annie expected. The job had hurt her, but it had also carried them through 11 years of rent, school clothes, groceries, and Christmas mornings that Denise refused to let feel poor. One afternoon, as Annie helped her sort old uniforms into a donation bag, Denise held the cracked North Lake badge in her palm. "I hated that place by the end," she said, "but I was proud I kept us going." "You should be proud," Annie said, "just not grateful to people who used it against you." Denise turned the badge over once, then set it on the kitchen table beside the claim paperwork. "That is a lesson I wish I had learned younger." The settlement process moved slowly, as Ruth had warned it would. An independent emergency fund provided temporary income for affected workers while their claims continued, funded partly by Harrison Capital but controlled by a community board and workers' representatives. William refused to put his name on it. When a business magazine requested a photograph of him standing with Denise and Annie, he declined without asking them whether they would participate. That decision reached Annie through Ruth, and she appreciated its quietness. William stepped down from daily control of the logistics division and placed Paula Chen in charge of an expanded compliance review. At home, his changes were smaller but harder for him. He stopped smoking in the car. He began eating breakfast with Lily, even when neither of them had much to say. One Saturday morning, Lily found him in the kitchen trying to make Margaret's cinnamon toast from memory. "You burned it," she said. William examined the dark edges. "Your mother made it look easier. She burned the first batch every time." He looked at her. "She did?" Lily smiled. "You are usually reading emails." The words hurt, but he did not defend himself. He put 2 new slices in the toaster and asked Lily to show him how her mother did it. By spring, Denise and Annie moved into a small apartment near a bus route and within walking distance of a neighborhood clinic. The building had clean hallways, working heat, and a kitchen window that caught the late afternoon sun. Denise stood in the empty living room on move-in day and turned the thermostat up 1 degree, then laughed at herself. "I know heat costs money," she said. Annie carried in a box of dishes. "Today, you are allowed to hear the furnace come on." The first package Annie opened contained new winter boots. She had bought them with her first paycheck from the clinic, where she now worked part-time at the reception desk while preparing for school. She held the boots beside the old pair that had carried her into the storm. The cracked soles were still rimmed with salt. Denise watched from the doorway. "You keeping those?" Annie considered it, then shook her head. "I remember enough without keeping wet shoes in my closet." In August, a letter arrived from the community college. Annie opened it at the kitchen table while Denise watched too closely to pretend she was not nervous. When Annie read the acceptance aloud, Denise covered her mouth and began to cry. "Mama, leave me alone," Denise said, reaching for her. "I earned these tears." Annie laughed into her shoulder. "You did. Promise me something. You study. You go to class. You do not turn your whole life into fixing what happened to me." Annie pulled back. "I want to be a nurse because of what happened to you. That is fine. Just make sure it is also because of who you are." On the evening of the following December 23, snow began falling again, softer than the storm the year before. William had invited Annie and Denise to dinner at his home, not through an assistant or formal card. Lily had called Annie herself and said, "Dad is making soup, and Mrs. Keating says we should arrive early enough to prevent disaster." Denise brought a sweet potato pie in a covered carrier. Annie wore the cream scarf, no longer folded away like something borrowed, and her new boots left clean prints along William's front walk. The dinner was held in the kitchen. William's soup was better than Lily had predicted, though Denise added a pinch of salt when he turned his back. "I saw that," he said. "You needed the help," Denise replied. "I accept professional guidance." "Good. You are improving." Lily laughed. and William smiled without looking surprised by the sound anymore. After dinner, Annie handed Lily a wrapped flat package. Inside was a charcoal drawing of the black sedan under a street lamp, snow sweeping across the road, and the passenger door opened to a small spill of light. Lily looked at it for a long time. "Where are you in the picture?" "About to get in." Annie reached for the scarf at her neck. "And I wanted to give this back." Lily placed her hand over Annie's before she could remove it. "No, it was your mother's. That is why I know she would want you to keep it." Lily looked at the drawing again. It went where it was needed. Annie left the scarf in place. A little later, she stepped onto the covered porch. Snow settled over the yard and the dark road beyond the gate. William joined her, carrying 2 mugs of cocoa. He offered one without speaking. She took it. "Thank you." They watched the snow for a while. "Do you still hate nights like this?" he asked. Annie held the warm mug between both hands. "Some nights I still remember standing outside your car." William looked down at the porch boards. "I know. I remember how long the window took to go up." She did not say it to punish him. That made it harder for him to hear. "I know that too." Annie turned toward the kitchen window. Denise was seated at the table with Lily, laughing as they looked through old photographs of Margaret. The room behind the glass was warm, not because anyone had been rescued, but because no one inside it needed to surrender their dignity to be welcomed there. "But now," Annie said, "I remember the door opening, too." William nodded. He did not ask for anything more. Lily opened the kitchen door and called out, "The pie is being cut," and Mom would have said standing outside in snow after dinner is ridiculous. Denise added from the table. She would have been right. Annie smiled and stepped inside first. William followed, closing the door against the cold, but not before the kitchen light stretched across the fresh snow. A year earlier, Annie Brooks had asked for one warm seat in a stranger's car. What she received was not rescue, and certainly not charity. It was the chance to stand in the light, speak her mother's truth, and make sure no other woman was left freezing behind a locked door. This story reminds us that kindness is not measured by a single generous act, but by what we are willing to do after we see the truth. Opening a car door may save someone from the cold for one night, but real compassion means listening without judgment, respecting a person's dignity, and standing against the injustice that placed them in danger. Annie and her mother teach us that poverty does not erase pride, hard work, or courage. William's choice teaches us that it is never too late to stop looking away and use our power to protect others rather than profit from their suffering. True justice begins when every person is seen, heard, and treated as worthy of warmth, safety, and respect. This video is a work of fiction created with the assistance of artificial intelligence. All characters, events, and situations are not real and do not represent any actual people or true stories. The content is intended for storytelling and emotional illustration only.